So I've got Talia, who is one of the creators of the Living Council, back on today. And if you haven't seen that podcast with Talia, highly recommend to go check it out because they're doing such big things in the freedom sector. And the reason I have Talia back here today is because she has a very important message to share because of a very personal experience or a few experiences that she had throughout her life. One I would say involved satanic like or type ritual abuse as a child, and she will go more into that. But Talia, when I first met you, I thought you were I still do, a very productive, very driven woman. And when you shared your story with me, I was quite shocked, to be honest, that you've
Really?
gone through all that because often I find I can pick up when someone's got trauma or they've had a hard life or a lot has happened to them. Um,
Mm.
but with you, I didn't pick up on any of that. And I thought, wow, what an incredible woman who had gone through all this and she's so successful. She's doing very well. She gets things done. And you're also just so happy and positive. It wasn't until I read about your story and where you arrived to, which I feel you should share as your message today, I understood why you are who you are today. And yeah,
Mm.
just wanted to give that little introduction for you. But yeah, did you want to start with how this all began for you, Talia?
Yeah, well, firstly, I want to say thank you for having me. It is a privilege to be back on here with you, Dee, because I just love our conversations and our backwards and forwards, and we kind of banter a lot. And we've been on the phone a few times, had lunch together, and it's just been awesome to get to know you and to get to know your followship and your listeners. And I just resonate a lot with what you do. And it's a privilege to be back on here. Obviously, people know a lot about the Living Council and what I've done and the work side of things. And this is extra special to be able to talk about something a lot more personal and a lot more. Um, I think it touches on many, many lives. So I'm grateful for this, and I'm excited to share this story and to just banter through some ideas and things that worked and things that didn't work and all of that with you. So thank you. I appreciate that so much. And when we were talking, you were talking about how freedom is so important to people. And I think the reason that this kind of bridges between my experience from my past and working for the Living Council. I mean, the Living Council is a beautiful baby that we're working on, and it's all about freedom, and it's about not being stuck under the oppressive governmental movements that happen out there. And in Australia, we're experiencing so much of it. So obviously freedom's important to me. And my book that I've written is actually called Fight, Flight, and Freedom. And so this story that we're going to talk about today, which is all about childhood abuse, it's related, isn't it? I mean, you can have freedom from the government, you can do things to step into the private and move into that private jurisdiction. But if you don't have freedom in your soul, if you don't have freedom internally, what's all that for? Right? Like, what's the point if you could be as free as a bird, but still just so locked up inside? And I just think they need to go hand in hand, which is what you're
100%.
all about, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. And that's why I think we get along very well because we both acknowledge the inner journey is just as important as the outer. If anything, the outer reflects the inner.
Doesn't it? Yep, it sure does.
So what's inspired you to write this book? And do you want to talk about your story, your journey as well? If you
Yeah. All right. So I have written a book, and it was an easy flow. Some people talk about writer's block. Well, there was absolutely none of that. So obviously it needed to come out. Obviously God wanted it out. He allowed me to just write and flow, and it just came through. And Fight, Flight, and Freedom is a book about exactly that, like fight, flight, and freeze. Most people talk about fight, flight, and freeze being the reaction to trauma and how our body goes into the primal kind of instinct when we are afraid of something or we're in danger. And sadly, I've had to live with fight, flight, and freeze for all of my life because of some traumas that happened. I'll come to that in a second. But it's cool because it's not just an indictment on someone's life when they've been abused to constantly be in fight and flight mode, but there is another option, which is freedom. And so that's the hope of that book, is that people would experience the freedom side of things. And trauma is something that covers many, many people, and different people have different types of trauma, and no trauma is bigger than another. It is what it is, and different people can have different things that give them that reaction. So some people, it might just be a screeching car that comes at them, and then all of a sudden they've got a trauma response to what's happened. And so when I share my story, people often say to me, oh, I've never had the trauma that you've had. It's nothing like what you've had, but the experience of it is the same. It's actually the same, different people, different things. So as I share my story today, I kind of just want to put it out there that trauma's trauma, and the body response to it and the soul response to that is the same. And that's the thing that I care a lot about. And that's what the book talks about. It goes into, yes, it's my story, but the same things. We all experience these things in life. And so hopefully just some of the things that I've written about and the strategies and the experiences that I've had moving through the trauma that I've gone through is able to help others. So my story started when I was, well, it started, everyone's story starts when they're born, but my journey in this whole thing, everything came to light when I was 35, which is fascinating because we're talking about childhood trauma. So when I was 35, I was actually seeing a hairdresser for business. I was in sales and marketing and things like that, and I was doing an interaction with him, and I went back to do a follow-up, excuse me, at his house, and was giving him some shampoo and conditioner. And I met him at the driveway, and he gave me a hug. You know those hugs where you're like, oh, this is a little bit too weird. This is a little bit long. This is a bit, whoa, I think you should probably be letting go of me about now. And then he started to kiss me down my neck, and he pushed his body into me, and I had to push him away and say, whoa, mate, I'm married, and whew, get off me. Then I managed to, in my trauma response, brush that aside and go, okay, let's just keep going with the interaction, and here's the shampoo, and let's just get professional here. But then I ended up being locked up in his house, and I noticed my makeup was on his shirt because I'd been pressed up against him, and all that time the stress responses were in me, and I was trying to just cope, because nobody should ever be in a position where they feel like they're frightened and someone else has got power over them. But anyway, I was there, and I was at the door, and I was trying to get out, and had to negotiate with him to let me out the door. And then he came to the car, and his hands are in the car and doing things, and it was really, really hard. I left, finally I managed to put my foot on the gas and got out of there, and went round the corner, and my first response was to sob. I just sobbed and sobbed, and I called my husband, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what's happened, and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. My husband said, I think you should probably call the police. So I rang the police, and I'm like, oh, I just met this man, he did this weird thing. What's his name? Oh, I'm not going to say his name because I need to just keep this space. But you will have heard of him on the news, because he was all over the news a fair few years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. And when I said the name, within a few minutes, the police were at my door. The sexual crimes unit were at my door, and they wanted to take my statement. So it was like very, very fast, like there was an alert. So I'd said his name, and then minutes later they were at my door wanting to take a statement. And then I was like, oh, no, I don't really want to do that. This is a friend of a friend. I don't want to bother people. I don't want to go down that path. And they said, how about you give us your statement, and then don't sign anything. At the end, if you've finished your statement, you've finished telling your story, then we'll tell you who he is, and then you can decide if you want to go ahead with it, and you can sign the statement. I was like, all right, fair deal. Let's do that. So went through, did my statement. At the end, they said that I was victim number 16 that he'd assaulted. And because everything else was done in a hairdressing salon, and then I was in his home, it was actually an escalated case. So then that started 2 years of court cases to put this man back behind bars. And here's the thing, Dee, he was out on bail when it happened to me.
Oh, God.
Yeah, our judicial system is quite an interesting thing, isn't it?
I was gonna say, why does that not surprise me? But anyway.
It's like, thank you, Australian judicial system, for just putting a man who shouldn't be out on the streets out to then do what he did to me after he'd done 15 other women in various different ways. Amazing. And yet there are people who are being pulled over and fined for ridiculous things that are no victims. But then
Mm.
when there are victims, they're not doing their job. So I've got a little bit of a beef about that. Anyway, he was found guilty and he did his time. He's supposed to be deported back to Lebanon and he doesn't want to go back. So he's still sitting in jail, even though he's finished his time in Villawood to this day, and he won't leave the country, but he won't be allowed out, which is good.
Yeah.
Now, finally, he's not allowed out.
Mm.
Oh, so then what happened was, I mean, that's just a bit of a story, whatever. And my responses were very normal on the day. But then that was in December. And by April, I had very much declined in my mental health. And that was the first time that I realized how profound mental health can be, and ended up not being able to leave my bedroom, was dissociative, which basically means that, you know, when you go driving and you're driving along and you're like, geez, I just went through 5 roundabouts, turned 3 corners, and I can't even remember doing it. That is called dissociative behavior. It's where you literally disconnect and you can stay in this state of disconnect. So
Mm.
by April, I was completely disconnected and I couldn't connect anywhere and I was not present in my body.
Wow.
So that then led to a lot of, ooh, like, what's going on? Come on, snap out of this. Like you said, like a high achiever. Like I'm used to being able to just bounce when other people break, but not this time. Not at all. I was in my room and not able to move, not able to talk, not able to think. And thankfully, victims of crime are able to have some counselling. And so there's many counsellors. Well, I was privileged and I got to see a good one
Mm.
because there are some not good ones out there, but I got to
Mm.
see a good one. And he just started to work through and say, yeah, you've obviously got PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was like, oh, that's something that men from war get? Why
Mm.
am I getting this? Like, it's just a little thing that happened. And so that started a journey with him working through different strategies. So EMDR, you've had that.
Mm.
Yeah. Do you want to explain that a little bit to
Yeah,
people?
sure. So EMDR is pretty much a therapy. It involves rapid eye movements. And what that means is when your eyes are moving side to side, it's able to tap into your limbic system. So whenever there's traumas in your early life, they get stored in the limbic system as a mechanism for survival. So anything that triggers that trauma, the limbic system will activate, and for survival reasons you'll be heightened and triggered. Uh,
Mm.
so,
Yeah, and it's actually kind of like a Tupperware drawer. You know, you have them, I have them. And you've got
mm,
that Tupperware drawer, you open it, you just sort of like, oh, I don't want to open it, I don't want to, and you open the cupboard and you're like, oh, everything's about to fall out because it just doesn't fit right. And there's like a container in there that is just the wrong shape and it doesn't fit. So what happens when you sleep? Because EMDR is actually simulating rapid eye movement, which is the same as when you sleep. So when you sleep, your eyes go backwards and forwards, side to side, and it's actually a process that your brain is sorting out your memories. So it's going, okay, there's a happy memory, put that there. There's a sad memory. There's a memory that smells like this. There's a holiday memory, whatever. Okay, so it's just sort of filing it away. But when you have a trauma memory, which is all those primal instincts have flared up, all of a sudden, now you have a memory that doesn't fit anywhere. And so it's sort of like you could open up that cupboard and all of the stuff flows out because there's nowhere for that memory to go. And
mm,
so your brain hasn't had the capacity to be able to file it properly.
and
So when
process
you
it.
have, that's
Mm,
it, the
yeah.
processing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Such a good
Good.
analogy. I love that. I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah, oh, it's so good. Like, and it just describes what goes on in my brain. Like, yeah, your cupboard's really full, lady. You need to figure this stuff out. So anyway, when you can file it properly,
Mm.
your executive functions can work, and you can cope, and you can do life, and we're good. We're good. But when you have PTSD, what it is, like, has anyone ever explained to you what PTSD is?
I know what it is. I think it'd be good to explain, yeah, what that is if
Mhm.
you feel like you want to share that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Because I feel like it's just this thing that you go, people at war get that
Mm,
and whatever. But it's actually, there's two types of stress. The
mm,
first stress is eustress, and the second stress is distress.
mm,
So eustress is good, healthy stress. So this conversation is a little bit of a eustress. Like there's a stress to it because it's like it's productive. We're getting things done. We've got a goal. You know, when you've got a goal in mind, you're a little bit more heightened and you're able to do things you wouldn't necessarily be able to do.
mm-hmm,
That's good, healthy stress. And when you have a chicken and a chicken lays an egg, if you stress that chicken out with eustress, it actually lays a more nutritious egg,
mm,
believe it or not.
mm,
Then you have distress. And so distress has a scale of, say, 1 to 10. So when you have like a plane that flies overhead, a low flying plane, your distress level goes from 1 to 3, say. Then it'll go back down. And so you just regulate like this. Then say you're running late for work
mm-hmm,
and there's a traffic jam. Your stress might go to, say, 5, and you might start to sweat a little bit, or your breathing becomes a bit shallow,
mm,
but you can regulate back down again. And then if you say have an accident, you might be up to like 7,
mm,
and you might have to take a few days to get over that. But if you have a trauma like what I'll describe in a minute happened to me, you actually break past the 8 point.
mm,
And once you get past 8, your brain has trouble coming back down. So you permanently live between 8 and 10 in
mm,
your distress. So what that means is if I'm constantly, my 1 is actually an 8, it means that if the kids have a plate on the side of the table and it's about to fall off, then I'm feeling like I'm at an 8 already, which means that if I then go any higher, I'm going to be feeling like my life is in danger. And
mm,
so I've said to the kids, if you put that there, it feels to me like you're holding a gun to my head, even though to you it feels normal, but that's because you can regulate all the way back down to 1. I can't. I'm permanently between 10 and 8, 10 and 8. And so anyone with PTSD is living in that broken threshold, and they can't bring themselves back down.
wow. I've never had that explained to me like that.
Mm,
And now I understand it better. And I can see that issue in people I've come across. And they probably don't even know that's what it is. So thanks for explaining that,
I
Talia.
think many people are living with forms of PTSD and varying degrees of it without knowing that it's there. And
Mm,
it's got to be causing problems in relationships. It's got to be
yes.
making life very hard for them.
Yeah, it's like your tolerance to any sort of pressure or stress is so low because you're already so heightened that you just get tipped over the edge with such a small thing. And
Mm,
that could break relationships. That could cause, lots of ongoing issues in someone's life. They don't realize that that's what's going on for them.
mm. And then there's the other element of, if you've had stress and then you've had stress again and then you've had stress again and then you've had stress again, and you've had anywhere where your primal instincts have had to kick in, that fight or flight moment has had to kick in, then you have like a compounded stress problem, and it turns from being PTSD to being CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And the
Mm,
other category where complex comes into it is if something happens in your formative years. That is the years between 0 to 7. 07, 0 to 6, they're debating about what that formative years is. But if something happens in that time that causes a child to go into a stress response and they have to deal with their fight or flight, then they are likely to have PTSD, and it's a more complex PTSD, and it can actually impact the personality and all sorts of other things that are really tricky to deal with.
Wow. That's good to know. Yeah. So you had complex PTSD.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because as I was going through the EMDR, I was saying to my psychologist, I said, like I think it's about time I'm healed. Don't you think so? I think we've been doing this well and truly long enough now. Let's snap. Let's get this thing going. Why can't I function? What's up with this? And he said to me the wisest thing he could say. He said, it'll go for as long as you keep asking that question. Great. So I've got to just learn to accept. And as we're going through, he started to explain to me there's probably some more stuff there, and we're going to do EMDR. So what he did was he did this treatment where he would go backwards and forwards with his hand, and I would have to watch and go backwards and forwards with the EMDR. And then he'd say, okay, what are you remembering? Or what are you thinking of? Or what's triggered for you? Like it might be, oh, I can see the color yellow. And he'd go, okay, that's good. Yep, write it down. All right, okay, go again. And he'd do this a few times. And then he'd say, okay, now what? And I'd say, oh, I'm hearing the phrase, it'll be right. Okay, write that down. Go again. So random, totally random stuff. And some of it's memory, some of it's thoughts. It doesn't matter actually what it is. The point is your brain is doing something in the background. Like we said, it's sorting the cupboard out. For me, though, and some people would go, oh, I never want to do EMDR if that's what it does. But this was actually unique because I needed to be in a very safe place. And clearly my body knew I needed to be in a safe place. And so I was with my psychologist doing this treatment when all of a sudden I remembered things.
What number was that? What session do you feel that was?
I'd been going for about 6 months.
Wow.
Doing EMDR.
And in 6 months, you got to a point where all your memories came back.
My memory started to come back.
Wow. Okay.
Because they had been so repressed and so hidden. And I had no idea of what had happened to me. Not a clue, not even an inkling, not even maybe something's happened to me and I've never remembered it. Not at all. Nothing. Because I'd lived a successful life. I'd, got married. I had 4 children. I was moving up in business and doing very well. I was general manager of a disability place. Like I was doing really well. There was no reason that you would suspect anything. So one day I'm doing this EMDR and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that was weird. And he goes, what was that? Because, he's writing it down. Oh, I just saw my neighbor naked from when I was a kid. Okay, that was weird. Sorry about that. Let's keep going. And he'd go again. See something in my dog, or go again. I'd think about my husband, whatever, go again. Or another image. Oh goodness, I think we need to stop. I'm just having all of these weird, my brain is being really gross right now. And I'm seeing things that I shouldn't be thinking about. And then he said to me, actually, I would put it to you that you're remembering things. And I was like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not remembering anything. It's fine. I'm fine. No, that's not what it is. And he said, okay, well, let's just go with that. It's not that. But let's just pretend if I was correct, if it is a memory, you're likely to be experiencing some symptoms over the next week or so. Like symptoms? Yeah, so you'll probably feel pretty tired. You may start to feel some physical symptoms. You may cry and not know why you're crying. That's all good. That's all your brain doing what it needs to do. It'll be right. Should be right, mate. It's just a weird little thought. Pick up my handbag, make an appointment for next week. See you next week, mate. Well, that week was everything he described. Wow. It was living hell. All the memory, all the physical memories came back. I could feel everything. I could see things. I I cried and I couldn't stop crying, and humbly went back to counselling. You're right. They were memories.
Mm.
And we went on and we did this for 18 months. And every week there were new memories that resurfaced. And so I was firstly abused actually by my grandfather when I was 6. And I'll explain that one in a minute. And then I was abused again when I was 9. And my neighbor was actually a psychopath. And the things that he did to me, you would see on a CSI movie. Tying up, burning, cutting, raping, everything. All of it happened. And I was 9, he was 17, and he had an intellectual disability. He'd been in the foster system, and he was clearly doing to me what he had done to him. He'd been abused, and so then he was outworking what he knew. And not that that's, I mean, that gives you understanding and you can appreciate, oh, I understand why someone would behave so badly when that's all they know, but it never gives an excuse. Because, I mean, I could do the same to someone else because something's happened to me. So where does it stop? It's got to stop somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You can have understanding, doesn't mean it's an excuse, and you can keep going with that behavior. But when I was 6, I was actually raped by my grandfather. And he did that because he was part of the Freemason movement. And Freemasonry is a weird thing. Like, it's so secretive. It's a bit of a men's club. And in that club, they do things to move up in the ranks of being recognized, or I don't even know. I don't really want to know. It's a bit sicko. And one of the things that they do in that club is they partake in pedophilia. And so Grandpa had gotten to that point in the club, and I was the chosen one. And I was a pretty cute little kid. So, but isn't it funny what people do and why they do things? You have to be pretty sick to do that, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm. So all I can remember is the one time that he hurt me, and I was 6 years old, and that caused a chain reaction. So when I was in year 1, Mum remembers that I came home, and for 12 months I vomited every single day, vomiting, 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 vomiting. And my little body was trying to purge what had happened.
Mm.
But my mind did not remember it. And I refused to wear skirts. No more skirts. That's it. I'm not wearing skirts. Mum couldn't, she'd buy them for me. I wouldn't wear them. She'd ask me if I wanted, nope, don't want to wear skirts. Why not? What's going on? Why don't you want to wear a skirt? And I didn't know. I just didn't want to. I'm not going to do that. Mum even said to me, has anyone done anything to you? Like, have you ever been in a situation where someone's hurt you? Or so she knew, like, deep down she knew. But I think that's clever, don't you, Dee? Like, that my brain was able to just cut out something so awful.
Definitely a survival mechanism, I think. Yeah.
I don't think a little kid could cope with that. They're not meant to. They're not meant
No.
to.
I don't think the body is dumb. I think it does things always to protect itself. And yeah, it's quite remarkable though that you can just swipe a memory like that, and but it happens just as you've experienced.
There's no way that a child could remember the things that I remembered and continue to function.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
There's no human way that you could hold those thoughts in your mind and grow up. And so God's put that thing in place where it is intentional to allow someone to go through life that they need to. And in fact, so your brain is made up with it's like two sides of a walnut, and the walnut comes together, and then you've got like this little bridge that's between, when you see a walnut, like a whole one, not a half one. And that bridge that goes between the two sides of the walnut actually is not joined, that it doesn't join until someone is 35. For a woman, it starts when they're 18 and slowly starts to fuse the two sides of the brain together through that little bridge. And that fusing starts at 18, which is actually when I first got one of my little tiny flashbacks, and I was like, what's that? Remembered something very small. But then by the time you're 35, it's fused, which means that women have been able to do the childbearing, raise the little babies up, and God's designed it so that once it comes together, you've done the hard stuff in, the raising of children and having a family and getting married and finding your partner, and all that hard stuff is done. Now you've got a little bit of a space to be able to process the things that happen early on. That's so clever. And if it wasn't for my brain doing that, I don't know that I'd be alive, honestly. It's just remarkable.
I didn't know about that until you told me that when you're 35, it fully fuses. Is it a common phenomenon that at the age of 35, people will start to get memories and flashbacks of?
I don't know about men. I only know about women because it's my story, and that's what I was educated on. And I'm not a psychologist. I don't know fully, but yeah, there is a lot of stuff that goes on for women as the brain starts to come back together, that at 35 they start to reconcile some things and work through and have a bit more clarity that they may not have ever had before. Doesn't mean that everybody's story is the same as mine. Everyone is different, and everyone's brain and story is different. But it explained something for me in my story, and it's been a thing that I'm grateful for. Really grateful for.
Yeah. Do you think that if it wasn't for that incident with that man when you were 35 and doing business and him trying to assault you, you would have had all these experiences going down that path of rediscovering your childhood and dealing with all of that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think that God is really kind to me, and I don't think anything is outside of his plan and his will. And so I believe that it was orchestrated so that I could be in a safe place to remember those traumatic things. I don't know how I would have gone. There were some memories, and there still are memories that come up, and I don't have a safe space of a counselor's office or, a team around me to deal with it. And I just think that there's reason behind it all. There is definitely reason behind it all.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you did mention to me that those who have been abuse victims at a young age and in their life tend to be easy targets
Yeah,
for later abuse.
Yeah, because I've actually been assaulted by 6 different people in my life. So my grandfather, my neighbor, and that was repeated, that was violent, and that was probably the most graphic I've ever heard of, is what happened to me with him. And then there was a man on a train who came and just started kissing my feet. He asked to kiss my face, and then he just started kissing my feet. Really random, weird, one of those weird ones that you pick up on the train. And then there was Joseph, so a few years ago, the hairdresser. And then there was my boss later on. So I started to ask the question, what is this? Have I got a sign on my back that just says, "Oi, pick me. I'm a good target. Come get me." Yeah, I honestly was like, what am I doing? Am I wearing promiscuous clothing that causes these people to come to me? Like, this doesn't seem fair. Like, this person next to me hasn't even been assaulted once, and yet I've got 6 perpetrators that have come into my life. What's up with that? And I had to go through this whole personal, like, someone please help me out here. My identity was really rocked.
Mm.
And my psychologist explained to me that I've had a team of people work on me because I'm a mixed bag. But anyway, one of them said that there's been research done into why would a psychopath choose who they choose. And to do the sort of behavior that's been done, it is psychopathic.
Mm.
There's no way around it. Like, you can't just excuse this is normal behavior. It's not. So there's this person who went into prisons and
Yeah.
psych wards, and they were interviewing known perpetrators,
Mm.
really violent rapists. And they said, why do you choose who you choose? What is it about the victim that makes you go for them?
Mm.
And they interviewed multiple people, like, over and over, and every single one of them said,
Mm.
because we can tell when someone's been done once before.
Wow.
It's like there's a sixth sense that they have for someone who has been a victim before,
Mm.
because they go, that I know that that one won't scream,
Mm.
which then makes you go, well, then we need to stop the first one from happening.
Mm.
And it made me go, of all the things, all the people that have hurt me, the hardest one for me to forgive was Grandpa. As much as the damage, there was a lot of damage done with my neighbor, and the things that he did still have lasting impacts on me. I just keep going, if Grandpa hadn't done what he did in the first step, when I was just 6, would I have been then a target for all those other men? And so I actually also recognized that there was there's actually, I think, like a foothold, a spiritual foothold that the enemy got in. And
Mm.
there was just this jarring, like that, like a door that's left open. And
Yes.
so a door was opened with Grandpa, and then there was a little foothold in there. And then that just invited. And so once I knew this, I then was able to go and find the treatment that I needed, which was prayer ministry. And I sat down with somebody and they worked through, and we actually closed doors spiritually with someone who was safe, someone who was a Christian, who understood all this process. And I
Mm.
was able to go, and we closed the door, and no more, no
Mm.
more attacks.
Wow.
So as much as it is them that can pick it up, I also believe there's a bit of responsibility on our part to just close up what was already opened.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. But it makes sense because it's like you've been opened up in a way physically, but also emotionally, energetically too.
Yep.
And they could sense that. It's
100%.
yeah. And it might even be the fact that the initial process of them trying to seek a target, it probably there would be roadblocks
Mm,
in the way where they would be like, okay, not this one. But
mm.
someone like you who's had that door slightly
Open.
opened, you pass the first phase, the second phase, and then it escalates because you've already been vulnerable in that area. And that's when you say they know that you won't scream too. So yeah, it's great that
Precious.
you pointed that out because it's such an important aspect of the healing process too. It's not just psychologically, but
Mm,
energetically as well. You do need to shut that off in your energetic emotional body too.
mm. I mean, people talk about Jesus, and he grew in stature with God and with man, but he grew in every area. It's not just physically, it's not just spiritually, it's not just emotionally, it's not just mentally, it's all of it. And
Mm.
all of it is included in something like this. And I believe sexual trauma is something that is, it's just a little bit different, because when you're talking about trauma, you're talking about someone who's using their power in a way, and sexual power is and then there's the shame factor, and there's the, I don't want to talk about it, that sort of, that shame stuff that comes in. It's just a little bit insidious.
Mm-hmm. And that shame is something that that person can carry for their whole life.
Mm. But interestingly, shame is something that is different for everybody. So for me, I'm not ashamed to tell you that I'm a rape survivor. I have no embarrassment around that, no shame. I'm not bothered by it at all. I can hold this conversation just fine.
Mm.
So I thought, oh, I don't have that problem like other people do. But I carry shame in other ways. And for me, it's in my body, and it's in how I look. I look at myself and I think, what an ugly woman. And so I'm ashamed around how I look, what my body looks like, and how I present in life. And so shame, it's not around the topic of conversation. I can hold this conversation fine. But if you wanted to look at me, you know, and it's debilitating. It's debilitating. That shame is, and that needs to be broken, man. That just needs to be cut off and done with. That's not right. No
Mm.
one should carry that shame around with them. Shame just isolates, and it's evil. It's so evil. And one of the best things that I've done is share my shame. So, I mean, I've had conversations with you, and it's awkward for me to say, but I have a lot of shame around my weight. And, I've shared with you that I really struggle with losing weight because of the protective fat that, and my cortisol levels and all that other stuff. And I don't want to make excuses because there's a part that I play. But that shame, if I don't share that with you, if I don't get real and get honest with you, then I'm just going to get more and more locked down into my own thoughts, and they're not healthy thoughts.
Mm.
So, if anyone's listening and they can resonate with the shame thing, the one thing that shame doesn't want is for you to share it. So share it. As hard as it is, say it. Get it out, because what you're thinking in your head is so different to what reality probably is.
Mm.
And if you don't get it out, no one can tell you what reality really is.
Yeah,
Anyway,
well,
there's my little sermon on shame.
no, that was awesome. It's really important to put that out there because we all deal with shame, different levels, different areas. It's not like one day you wake up and it's completely gone or whatever. It's acknowledging it and understanding. It's the thoughts that come after that. You might get angry at yourself and the shame will cause some sort of negative thoughts and belief about yourself. But then if you can step away from them and be like, hey, Talia, you know what? You've been through a lot and that's okay. That's fine. We're working through this sort of thing, you know? So I
Mm.
think don't shame the shame.
No, that's
Yeah.
right. Don't
Yeah.
shame the shame.
Yeah. It's really good that you brought that up. I think a lot of people deal with that, especially people who've been violated. It's such a massive element to it all. It's probably the hardest part to address. And it's great that
Mm.
you also highlighted the fact that it can be experienced in different ways, you
Yep.
know?
Yeah, for sure. So I had shame to the point of suicide. So
Mm,
I'll never forget being, I was a mess. I was absolute mess. I was like crying all the time, couldn't cope. Obviously, that's part of the journey. That's just part of the burden that I needed to bear because of
mm,
what had happened to me. And
mm,
so I had to go through healing. And a lot of that is just being a mess
mm,
and letting the mess be and just be the mess that I felt at the time. And I remember my sister said, "You're a mess. You shouldn't be around the kids. Just go and just take a retreat." So she sent me off to the Blue Mountains in New South Wales in Sydney, and I went to this beautiful retreat, this lovely Christian, like a church, and they had these little cabins that you could stay in, and I got to stay for free, and they cooked meals for me, and I could just have quiet for a week. Obviously, it wasn't quiet because there was a lot going on in here, but I went for a bushwalk, and I'll never forget. being right on the edge of the Blue Mountains is known for its amazing views. And I was right on the edge of this cliff, just looking out at this incredible view. And I was at my darkest. I was absolutely at my darkest. I couldn't even be with the kids because I was too messy, and I couldn't, when you're in it, you can't see what the future brings. And I was in that point, and I'm like, I can't see any way out of this. Stood on the edge, and I was like, it would be so, so much easier just to go for a sudden stop, and just to, that would just be the easiest thing. And if anybody has ever been in the place where it is actually easier to do that, and it was more brave for me to step back. Clearly I did, because I'm still alive. So I stepped back, sobbed for a long time, went back to the cabin, and I remember sitting down and I'm journaling. The sun's starting to come down, there's a beautiful view. I'm sitting at this wood log table thing, and I'm journaling, and there's a clue. One of the biggest and best things you can do is journal, and you can pray your way through everything. So I'm praying, and I'm writing, and I'm writing the one question that you ask, and the one question that I ask, and the one question every single listener asks. Okay, God, if you are ever present, which means you're everywhere, that means you were in the room when Grandpa did the first thing. You're supposed to be all loving. You're supposed to be all powerful. How could a good God allow bad things to happen to good people? Okay, but here's the thing. You ask that of starving African people and children that have been raped. I'm the one who's been raped. And here I am going, how could you do this, God? And all of a sudden, my arm just flew off the table, and like someone had grabbed it and pulled it off the table, physically like wrenched off the table, scribbled down my page, and I audibly heard the voice of God. And I'm not like one of those people that will say, oh yeah, I hear God all the time. No. This is one time I heard him. I know for a fact, you can debate it all you like, but I know. And he said to me, alone is worse than pain. It's a very weird experience to have that happen, to hear the voice of God, but to hear those words, alone is worse than pain. So basically there's this scale, right? And we have this scale, and we go, oh, pain is the bottom, pain is the end stop. I don't want to get down to the bottom, so I'm going to try and do everything I can to stay out of pain. So I'm going to stay up here, and I'm going to live for a pain-free life, and I want to be, anti-aging creams, and I want to have all the toys, and I want to be successful because I don't like the idea of pain. And what God was saying to me in that moment is that pain is not the bottom. Separation from God is. And so I was in pain, but I was not alone. And so when I think back to the time I was lying on the floor and the chiffon curtain was going and Grandpa was hurting me, and I said, can you please make it stop? And he said, it'll be over soon. God was in that space with me, and he was grieving just like I was. And today, and when the memories came back, my husband has no idea what they are. My parents have no idea what they are. My friends don't know what they are. You don't know what they are. No one can relate. No one can know what has happened to me except for me, and God does. And I can't tell you, I can't be emphatic enough about the impact that has had on my journey through this, because the thought of going through all of this healing by myself, it's paralyzing. But here God was saying, I was with you, and I am always with you, and I will be with you to the end. I mean, any Christian will tell you that Jesus, the name Jesus, actually means Emmanuel, which means God with us. And that, I mean, there's many things that I'd like to talk about what I did and what people can do to heal through things. but that would be the foundational thing, is to stop asking the question, why would God allow bad things? No, wrong question.
Mm.
The question is, are you with him or are you trying to do it on your own?
I started getting goosebumps when you were telling me that story.
Maybe
Because
that's God telling you he's with you.
yeah, I just think I don't ever think that we're alone. And it's such an important reminder that we're not walking this journey alone. We never are. And just because we can't see or feel, I mean, you heard it, but
Yeah.
all the time, don't let your senses fool you. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful.
Well, of course, it was beautiful for me too. It still is. It
Mm.
took the sting out of it. Took the sting. I mean, it was very painful. Everything's still painful, but
Mm.
pain's not the end stop.
Yeah.
We
And
constantly think we can't do pain. You can. You can. You can do pain, and you can do some of the worst pain in the world
mm,
and still come out and survive and be a victor, not a victim.
mm. And I like how earlier you mentioned what's happened to you has happened, but we also have a responsibility to heal
Mm.
and get the support that we need to work through all that. And I think that's so important because it's so easy to just want to give up or be the victim your whole life. I'm not putting people down about your traumas, but we also have a responsibility to face that, work through that, because especially if you're having children, you don't want to pass those traumas and vulnerabilities onto them.
Mm. Yeah, and I remember someone saying, what your face looks like up until you're 40, well, that's just genetics. But after 40, it's your responsibility. Are you eating well? Are you drinking well? Then your face is your responsibility. Well, actually, your whole life is your responsibility.
Mm,
And so whatever you get, it's yours to deal with. I happen to get a big plate of responsibility that I have to look after, and you have your size plate, but it's yours and you have to deal with it. I remember this analogy I heard from this lady in America, incredible. And she goes, if I put all of my problems onto the table, and D, you put all of your problems onto the table, and you put all of your problems on the table, we go around the table and we have a look at everyone's problems, without a shadow of a doubt, you'll go back to your own. Because
mm,
you look at everything else and you go, I don't want that. And so you got problems. Everyone's got problems. And I can sit here and go and tell you my problems, but I don't want yours because they scare me. Everyone has stuff to deal with. The point is, are you dealing with it?
mm,
And it would have been so easy just to sort of go, sudden stop sounds fun. I think I'll just jump over the edge and be done with it. But it took 7 years from that point to get to where I am today, which is whole, healed, happy, and living as a victor, because it took so much work, so much work. And the work that I did was, firstly, I ate well. I looked after my food. I made sure I supplemented on whole food plant supplements. I drank water. I didn't do any alcohol. I didn't do any drugs, nothing, nothing. I exercised. They're just physical things I did.
mm,
I journaled. I got counseling, good quality counseling, because there's some shocking people out there. And you need to really tune in on your gut with that. And you need to know, yeah, I feel safe and I'm able to trust this person. If you can trust them and you've really got that trust there, keep going. If you don't have it, stop. There's someone out there that can help. Then there's prayer as well. Like, prayer is something that's so important too. And you can go to your local church and you can ask anyone to pray for you. And all of those. And then there's the relationship side. I had to share things with my kids and my husband, and all of it is like a multifaceted thing to come to a place where you are moving forward and you are becoming the victor. See, here's the thing. Grandpa, I didn't scream. Eric, I didn't scream. Joseph, I didn't scream. No one, none of them, silent. And I was a victim. And now I'm publishing a book. Did they not know that I would publish their story to the whole world? And I'm not saying that everyone who's a victim needs to write a book, but you have a responsibility to become a victor and not wallow in your self-pity. because there's actual injury and then there's plom. Plom is poor little old me. Poor little old me. Oh, poor little old me. The moment you go into plom, you're dead in the water.
Mm.
So it doesn't matter what your plate of responsibility is. And it kind of doesn't really matter how you go about healing. But don't ever, ever succumb to self-pity and have a little party there.
Mm.
Not worth it.
And I think it's important to highlight that when you turn that pain into strength and you transmute what happened to you, it's like you've won, because when you're stuck in that self-pity and you're just constantly replaying everything and not wanting to get out of that, it's almost like you're letting them win in a way.
Mm. That's where they put you.
Mm.
Are you going to stay there? That's
Mm.
easier said than done.
Mm. Of
It,
course.
it is, and credit needs to be given to anybody who works through their stuff. And you've worked through stuff, Dee. I know that. We've had coffee over it.
Mm.
And I've worked through stuff, and it's not a small thing. It is hard, but it has to be done. It just has to be done. You've just got to do it.
Mm.
And it's not fair what happened to me. None of it is fair. And you can look at the burden and you can go, oh, who's got more burden? Okay, well, I'll tell you now, I've probably got more than most of the readership here. You know, the stories that I have in my childhood are, are more than you'd find in a nursing home full of people, you know? It's
Mm.
disgusting how unfair it is. But fair has nothing to do with it. Are you going to stay there or aren't you? Who cares about fair? Forget fair. Life is not fair, mate. It just isn't. And this whole idea of equality and fair and all of this is just a joke.
Mm.
Life is not fair. And I'm the first to say that. But I'm also the first to say I've worked through the unfairness. And you can too.
Mm. Were you able to work through forgiveness with your predators?
Some people would say that forgiveness means forgetting. And I would put it to you, it doesn't. I remember every single detail, yet I forgive them. I've forgiven every single person who's hurt me for every single thing that they've done to me. And I want to just put a preface out there. What is forgiveness?
Mm.
Firstly, it's not forgetting, okay? Because, I mean, even God, who is like the all being of forgiveness, okay? He wrote an entire Bible talking about all the sins and the crap of Israel, and yet he forgive them. So if forgiveness is forgetting, then why would he write a Bible? So he wrote a Bible full of all the things that they did wrong and all the ways he forgave them, and yet he still forgive them. So it's not forgetting. So I don't need to think, oh, I've got to forget what happened to me. No, that's not forgiveness. And forgiveness is also not waiting for someone to say sorry. So my dad for a long time thought that you can be ready to forgive, and we are called to be ready to forgive. So say you hurt me, Dee, I got to go, yeah, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. When you're ready to say sorry, I'm ready to forgive. No, it's not even that. You need to forgive whether you get an apology or not. Absolutely none of my perpetrators have said sorry to me. In fact, Grandpa, on his dying bed, my sister went to see him for one last time just to see if there was a chance we could get some reconciliation. She walked into the room and he goes, "Where's your sister? She needs to apologize to me." So he said I needed to say sorry to him. The truth is, he needed to say sorry to me, but I never got it. No apology, but there's absolutely nothing between me and Grandpa. And I hope you can see that in the way that I'm talking. There's no resentment, there's no bitterness, there's nothing. And so, what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is the ability to say, you hurt me. That's the first thing. You have to acknowledge what's happened to you. You hurt me and you hurt me deeply. You hurt me here, 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 here. And you say that. You say that in your head and you acknowledge the pain that you've gone through.
Mm.
And then the second step is, but between you and me, nothing exists. I'm going to let it all go. May God deal with you as he sees fit. But as far as you and I are concerned, it's as if nothing ever happened. So I can say that confidently to all of the guys. Would I stay in a room if Eric was there? Nope. Do I still forgive him? Yes. And here's the interesting thing. When everything happened, because Eric did things like he tied me up and raped me and put a telephone cord around my neck and my legs and did awful, awful things to me. I was 9, he was 17. And at 17, he was doing that sort of behavior. What's he going to be like at 37? You know, what's that man going to be doing? He's sick. He's really sick. He's not safe. So when these memories came back, I was then asked, do you want to go to the police and make a statement? I'd forgiven him. I'd done this process. Between me and Eric, there's nothing. It's as if nothing ever exists. I hold nothing against him. Do I want to go to the police? Yes, I do. So forgiveness doesn't mean that there's no consequences. There are still consequences for behavior, but the bitterness I feel, what's between you and me, nothing. But I won't be in a room with you because I need to keep myself safe.
Mm.
And the fascinating thing about forgiveness is the freedom that it brings. Because everybody's heard this story. Unforgiveness is the poison you drink, hoping that they'll die.
Mm.
I'm going to drink unforgiveness. I'm going to hold on to this. I'm going to have bitterness. I'm going to have anger. I'm going to hold something between you and me. And I'm hoping you're going to die because I'm not giving you forgiveness. And I know that's a cliche phrase, but it's exactly what it is. So to go to your person that you're thinking of right now, and everyone's got one, and you think, I got to forgive that person, you're going to be the one that benefits. And is it a one-time thing? No. Some days it was moment by moment, arduous task to forgive people, forgive them. Other times it's quite simple and it's easy, and I can say, I forgive you. And sometimes it was repeated. Today, I forgive you. Tomorrow, I have to forgive you again, and I have to keep forgiving you. Thankfully, with all those other things that I did to heal, forgiveness became easier, and it became a lifestyle that I've chosen to live. There are moments where I'm like, oh, I want to have something between me and you. But it does get easier.
Mm. I think that the most important part through all of that is to be kind to yourself and not judge how you feel, not feel like you have to force forgiveness, not feel like you have to do shit when you're not ready. Just honor where you're at, really. That's the self-love you need.
And you don't need to be in the space of a perpetrator.
Mm.
Forgiveness doesn't mean you put yourself into danger. There are consequences. If someone is dangerous, you don't be with them. That's a boundary. Put a boundary in place.
Mm.
Put boundaries around your children. If you're in a place where they're in danger, you can forgive that person, but don't keep your children there. Be responsible about that. So this call, hey, let's be forgiving, is not a call to be reckless. It's not a call to be stupid. But don't hold on to that bitterness. Don't have something that's just weighing you down.
Mm. Yeah, well said. And from all of your experiences, with all the memories that came back to you and what you've been through, do you have any advice you want to give parents or people who might be in the same situation?
Good question. So yes, my parents let me go for a sleepover to grandpa's house. And sleepovers are a thing that are done. aren't they?
Mm.
And I have grown to a place where I just don't know that they're really necessary. And 1 in 4 people are sexually abused. 1 in 4. But when you are going for a sleepover, you're going to sleep. Then you're going to put your pajamas on and you're going to be unconscious and you're going to be in a bed. These are all setting up for if you happen to be in the space of a perpetrator, it's just too easy. It's just too easy. And why? That's my question. Why have a sleepover? What's the point of that? Sleep is a very, very precious thing. Sleep is a necessary thing. It's like drinking water. Like it's not a game. It's part of what you need. You go to bed to go to sleep to get the rest that you need to do the next day. Have you brainwashed and all that sort of stuff, right? But then we have children going over to their friends' houses for sleepovers where they're in a very vulnerable place. And this is my grandpa we're talking about. And rape doesn't happen in alleys in Australia. They might happen over in Africa, but in Australia, rape and child abuse happens with people that you know. And you don't think that they're going to do that, but you don't know. They look like my grandpa looks like anybody else. And you don't know who the perpetrators are out there. And there's a lot of them because 1 in 4, there's a lot of them out there. And you don't know who that is. And so why say yes to that sleepover and no to that one? Because maybe you think maybe you don't know. You don't know who it is. And so my rule at home was we're just not going to do sleepovers, kiddos. My kids didn't like it, but I don't care because I knew the damage that could happen and it's not necessary. The other thing I would give advice on is to teach your children how to listen to their gut. You know, you've got intuition for a reason, and God gave you that. And I would put it to you that the Holy Spirit works with you to tell you when something's not right. And so if you get that sense, oh, I just don't feel real good right now, or like you're in the presence of somebody that just makes you feel a little bit awkward, tune in and learn to listen to it. Too much in society is giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. Oh yeah, they'll be right. No, I'm just feeling this thing. Don't worry, they're fine. Well, I just put it to you, maybe just try and let yourself feel those things, acknowledge what you feel, and put things in place. It doesn't mean you're fearful. It doesn't mean you're afraid all the time, but you are giving honor to that feeling that you've got. I now don't have it at all. Like I can go into dangerous places and I don't feel it at all. And unfortunately, I've just been damaged so much that I have to rely on all my friends and family to tell me this is not a safe place. This is not a safe person. But children have it instinctually from when they're a baby. They have that feeling. So if you've got kids, train them in it. Honor those feelings, even if they're not what you feel. Maybe they're picking something up you don't pick up. And allow those boundaries to be in place. Put boundaries around sleep. Put boundaries around who you hang out with. Because it's just not worth the damage that you have to work through from one incident. It just takes one, and your whole life is changed. So why don't we just protect those kids? Keep them safe. Help them to learn how their gut works. Respect them when they say they're uncomfortable. Equip them with words to say. This is my body, and I'm not comfortable with you being that close to me. This is my body, and I don't want your hand on it. This is my body, and I have the right to say, not for you, go away. But you do that with someone who mummy feels safe with and daddy feels safe with. I suppose I'm supposed to feel safe with it. But if I'm given the permission to be different to mummy and daddy, and I don't feel safe with that person, even though mummy and daddy do, I don't, and I'm given permission to feel that, that is a good thing. Another thing is, if your children say to you, something has happened, believe them, no matter what. because too often a child will say to their mum or their dad, someone made me feel uncomfortable. And mum or dad will say, oh, what are you talking about? Nah, they're fine. And dismiss it. And if they're coming out with the smallest bit of truth to you, and a child never ever wants to lie about something like that. This is not in their nature. They're not interested in that. Kids don't. So if they're saying anything along that line, you need to acknowledge that it's the truth. And you need to be for your child, not the perpetrator. As hard as that is. This is my dad's dad. You know what my dad did when he found out? He wrote a letter to his dad, like I said what happened. Actually, the counsellor told him. And Dad, oh, we believe you, he said. We believe you. And he had a responsibility to me, not his dad. But can you imagine being in that situation, being my dad, knowing that his dad had hurt his daughter? Like, that's just a, Anyway, Dad wrote a letter to his dad and said, Tahlia said this. And I'm shocked, basically. Put it into the envelope, put it in the box, was the last thing he ever said to his dad. Last thing he ever said. His dad then wrote a letter back to me. His dad's lawyer wrote a letter back to me demanding that I apologize. But the greatest thing my dad did in my whole healing journey is from the word go. He said, I believe you. So if a child ever says to you or a friend says to you, I've been abused or I've been hurt or something happened to me, always believe them. No one's going to lie about that. And the other thing I would say to mums, so this is exciting, this is cool, this is really special, and I kind of love the idea of sharing this, Dee, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Is I'll never forget Mother's Day. And obviously with my trauma, I had a whole team of people around me helping, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, social workers, the lot, doctors, everyone, because I was messed up. Probably still am a bit messed up. But anyway, there was a whole team of them. And they even had some people who are learning doctors, learning psychologists, looking at my case, because I had been so severely hurt as a kid. They were confused as to why I was not addicted to something, drugs, alcohol, promiscuity. Why did I not move from relationship to relationship to relationship? How come I could be married to one man happily and raise children and have a successful career with all that had happened to me? And they were baffled. They were like, oh, we don't understand how this is, because it's not textbook.
Well, that's what I was thinking when I met you too. I was like, how?
Yeah, like it's just a miracle.
Yeah.
And it is a miracle, and the miracle is in this. This whole team did study into why this could even be possible. And the answer is that the abuse happened outside my home. So my little body saw the blackest of black behavior outside of the home. Then I came home, and my mum and dad were a normal, typical family, you know, love each other, have their little argy-bargies. They're not perfect, you know. She would tuck me in for bed at night. I would get a birthday cake to celebrate who I was, and I'd have my Vegemite sandwich as I went to school. And all of that was just, I was raised in a loving family home. And the love that they gave my little brain meant that I knew white. I did know black. I had experienced childhood rape. I'd known the worst of worst. But I also knew good. I knew what a family who loved Jesus is like. And so my brain at 6 was able to go good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. So as bad as it had been, because my mum did what she did best, and she was just a mum. And she didn't know at the time that her tucking me in at night and telling me to, you know, clean my teeth and pull my socks up and stop leaving a mess around and loving me was actually saving me. and my brain was able to form, my whole career, my whole life was able to go ahead, all because my home was white. My home was loving. My home was set on godly principles. And so when people say to me, other mothers, I've talked to that many women, and they're like, oh, I just don't want anything bad to happen to my children. And I'm like, stuff's going to happen to your kids. Stuff happened to you, happened to your husband, happened to your sister. Stuff is going to happen. And it's sad and it's horrible. And it shouldn't. And I wish it didn't, but it will. But your love as a mum can carry them through all of that. And you don't know what you're doing to your child's brain by showing them white, as much as they might experience black. That white and being the opposite. That Mother's Day, when I got that information and they said, it's your mum that saved you because your mum loved you and you were able to do that. Your brain was able to function because the abuse wasn't happening in your home. That Mother's Day, just the, oh, just the gratefulness I felt towards my mum. Like, if she hadn't done that, I just don't know where I would be. And I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I just think there's so much power in the home.
Yeah. To continue on from that, I think with all the stuff that we're dealing with and trying to create a life of freedom and a life that's not being controlled by the government and all that kind of stuff, I see a lot of people who are so set on getting freedom from the government and doing all these things, but they're neglecting their family home. And I think that should be everyone's priority. The family home, the family unit needs to be good, needs to be solid, needs to be a loving, healthy environment. Then you can do all that stuff, because they're still winning if you've still got chaos in the family, just based on the information you just shared.
Oh, of course. And that's the one thing that they'll attack is the marriage. Because if the marriage can fall apart, the family can fall apart, the society can fall apart, and the government can come and hold us because the family doesn't. We can just get back to exactly what you're saying. You know, if you don't have a strong family, well, what are you doing looking out there? Forget the government, mate. Just get yourself sorted. And there's so much power in that, you know, like, doesn't matter what's going on out there. Mum, if you're listening, I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Talia's mum, because Talia's doing big things in the world now.
Yeah, man, bring it on.
So tell us about your book. Are you in the process of publishing it? What's happening there with that?
So I have written the book. It's all finished and it's been read a few times, and we're still just to get the editing finalized. But a number of people have said to me, oh, you've written your book. Excellent. That's great. That's really good, because they've heard this sort of stuff and they're like, you got to get that published. And I thought, you know what? Let's do this as a community. I live the story, but what about if we all got it published together? And it was a community project, because publishing's not cheap. And the best publisher that I've found for my genre of story, which is inspirational Christian motivation kind of genre and story, is the Zondervan publisher, which I can't get into because I'm not known by them. That's fine. That's fine. They're for amazing people like John Maxwell. But they do have another publishing company called Westbow Print, and I quite like them. They're probably the right fit for my book. And to get published through them cost me between $6,000 to $10,000 to do. So I want my story out there. I think it's great to have my story out there, not for me, because I don't need my story published for me. But I believe that there's so much in there of what God's done in healing me that can help other people and give hope and help people to stop having their victimhood and start to rise up into the victory that we can claim, and to have that freedom and that forgiveness and all the rest. So I was like, you know what? If everybody wants this done, I've written the book, it's ready to go. Why don't we, as a group, come together and we'll do it through a crowdfunding option.
Mm.
So I put it onto Kickstarter and I've got it there so that everyone can be part of that together and we can do it together as a group. So far, I'm 10% funded. So looking forward to seeing that get there. I've got 1 month to go and let's get it published as a
Yeah.
group. So if you want to, I would absolutely love for you to buy in on the publishing side of things. There are rewards. So if you tick one box and you donate or contribute towards the publishing cost, then you actually get the book for free, or you get the ebook, or you get the, there's little rewards and things for whatever you decide to donate. You can donate more than what is in there. But, I'd love to see this out. I've written it. It's just now about the group, all of us coming together and making it happen.
I love that. That's such a good idea
Mm.
because so many will benefit from you sharing your story, which you didn't have to do. So let's work together in getting this out there. Like you said, it's not cheap to publish. So
No, it's
I feel honored to share it. So I'll put it in the description, the link for those who want to contribute as well.
Thank you. And then my other goal from this is
Mm.
actually to do a speaking tour. So I would like to go all around Australia and do just this, basically this, and just say, hey, let's do this. Let's change things in the home. Let's change things for people's story. You can turn your story around. You don't have to have plum. You can be a winner. You can get through whatever has been dished in your direction. And so I'm really excited about the idea of doing a speaking tour around Australia, around the US, like really just get the story out there that these perpetrators can't win. It's not over. It's not over
Mm.
yet. And we can rise up and we can win with forgiveness, and we can win by, not being a victim, and we can win by taking the next step and not taking the sudden stop. We can do
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
it's important we do it.
I love that. Thank you,
Yeah.
Talia. You're a great speaker, and you speak from the heart. And I've
Mm.
always felt that from you. You're very genuine and authentic, and I feel like the world is very blessed for your presence and what you're doing and the the impacts you're having on people's lives, including mine. You've made me realize a lot of things since we've met, and I
Isn't it
can
funny how
see.
we meet these people along our journey and they just put a little seed of something into us? Like
Yeah.
I've met so many people. I'll never forget Sharon just putting a little something into me, and I'll hold on to that and I will always remember that. I remember Chris putting something else into me. I remember my mum, and everybody has something that they add. You've put things into me,
Mm.
and it's part of doing this thing well, isn't it? Like, what have I learned? What have you learned? Like, let's just share that stuff. And the biggest person who's put into me has been Jesus. And I mean, I know I go on about that, but like, I've got to be honest here. Like, you got me on here to be honest, and I would say
Yeah.
my relationship with God has been so pivotal to going through that process. And I'm excited for other people to discover that as well, and all the different bits and pieces and the freedom that you can experience. I
Mm.
still struggle. I do still struggle. Unfortunately, I was hurt with scissors and he wanted to make me bleed because he wanted to know what it was to have a period. And so I was 9 and I was raped with scissors. And every month I still struggle. Every month I'm in the bathroom holding onto the shower like, Aram, I need you just here because this is traumatic for me. And so in saying all of the stuff we've talked about today, healing is not just glossy. And it doesn't mean that you don't continue to have things that are hard. Stuff is still hard, but that's okay because pain's not the end stop, is it?
Mm.
And I don't like hearing other people who've spoken on stage or read a book and it's like, oh, everything's perfect now.
Mm.
And I'm at the point where it's not perfect for me, but I'm reading this thing that says it's perfect for them. It's like, no, it's never perfect for anybody. And that's a lie if you think that it is. But maybe my imperfection and your imperfection, we can kind of help each other to get just a little bit better, just a little
Mm.
bit more peace.
Yeah,
A
I
little bit.
think that being realistic in that way is so important because we are fed this fairy tale story, magical ending where No, but that's it. Life is all good after that, and you don't have to deal with it. It's not.
No,
It's
no,
not.
no.
Mm,
But it doesn't have to be the other either.
exactly. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And in your book, you do grey out certain parts that are quite detailed, just for those who might be a bit sensitive reading about.
Like there's a thing called vicarious trauma, which is where you can adopt something that's happened to me and you can go through post-traumatic stress disorder,
Mm,
although it never happened to you, but just hearing about what happened to me or adopting something that happened to me. So I know that that's a very real thing. So the book actually doesn't talk about my trauma very much at all. Like maybe all up in the whole book, maybe 1 page worth of description on what happened as a child or in the abuse moments. And so, because I know that there's so much value in reading the book, I didn't want any reader to feel like I can't pick that book up because I'm afraid of what I'm going to read. I don't want to read those graphic details. So I've left it grey so that they're grayed out. And so when you're reading along, Dee, you can go, oh, I'm reading. Okay, there's a grey bit. I'm not up for detail. And you need to be wise with that. Maybe you're not. If you've got experience yourself, probably not a good idea to read detail. Skip over and you're not missing much of the good stuff, the stuff that's actually beneficial to you. And you can skip over and you don't miss it. So it's not meant to be a book that's like, oh, childhood rape, I don't want to read about that. That has been considered.
mm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's very considerate of you. Is there anything else you wanted to share or leave everyone with the last final words, wise words of yours?
Well, I
Mm.
think that if you have your own story at the moment yourself and you've gone
Mm.
through any sort of trauma, whether it's childhood abuse or
Mm.
you're in a traumatic relationship now, or there's something that's going on or something that has gone on or anything like that, then I would suggest that you reach out to your local church and you get some help. You know, just find somebody that can pray with you, get some counseling if you need it, pull some people around you. The one thing that perpetrators want, the one thing that the enemy wants, is for you to be alone. So
Mm.
don't be alone. That's the first step, is don't be alone. Don't do that thing by yourself. And I also want to say I'm really sorry. I'm sorry that this has happened. I'm sorry that whoever it is has hurt you. It's not right and it's not okay. And you're worth so much more than their actions have said. And I hope and I have been praying for you and I'll continue to pray that you will find healing and you will find the forgiveness and you will find that you can rise up out of the ashes and you can come to and you have a story that's worth saying and sharing. And but I understand when you're in it, it's very, very hard and I'm sorry. I hope you find your freedom.